Hi, this is Travis with another video today. Today's topic is going to be foam rolling, and that's one of those topics that gets a bit of debate. Some people will tell you it's great, some people will tell you it's not that great. So I'll give you my 2 cents at the end of the video today, but I want to go ahead and jump into this for those of you who are already sold and like it. Just going over a few of the basic rolls. There's a ton of stuff you can do with one of these. I'm going to show the ones that I think are more bang for your buck rolls. The most popular two that most people tend to do are the mid-back and then the IT bands. So I'm going to start with those, and then I'm going to go through some of the other more nuanced rolls, and then at the end, again, I'll give my 2 cents on where I think rolling can kind of fit best. So the way you're going to roll your mid-back, I'm going to get this one out of the way for now. Just use the standard roll. Again, this is the one that's about 3 feet tall and 6 inches in diameter. So if you have one of those laying around, again, you could use a smaller one though if that's all you have for both of these rolls. Okay, so you're just going to pretty much go in the middle of your back with this. Now think about kind of where the bottom of your ribs are, at least as low as you can feel. Now you have 2 lower ribs back here, which we call floating ribs, the last 2. Those don't come around and attach to the front of the sternum. So you can kind of feel here, and that's about where your 10th rib is. And that's probably about as low as you want to go, because those last 2 ribs probably aren't going to take as much pressure, and I wouldn't encourage you to try. So pretty much from about as low as you can feel up is kind of a good starting point. And so just cradle your head in your hands. That part's not mandatory, but it's a nicer way to relax into this, okay? And then as far as what your elbows are doing, you can take your elbows and you can move them apart or back together. That part's kind of up to you. So if you want to bring your elbows apart, that's going to move your shoulder blades together so you can get more on top. And when you move your elbows together, that spreads your shoulder blades so you can kind of get the meat in between. And so quite frankly, I do a little bit of both. So I'll get in here and I'll kind of spread them apart to get on top a little bit. And then I'll do a few rolls where I'm kind of together, okay? The other thing you can do, which I don't see people doing as much of, is you can also do bias one side a little bit at a time on this. So you can kind of roll, and then I can also kind of just rotate a little more to one side. So that's going to put a little more pressure towards the left, or obviously vice versa on the right, okay? And so that's a pretty good way you can just roll that middle of the back area. People will try to roll their low back in this position too. But the problem with that is once you're way down here in the low back, to sustain yourself there, your core muscles have to work extremely hard to where it's going to be really hard to relax into that. So your low back is not going to relax, and so it's kind of a futile attempt. So typically if I'm going to go into my low back from this position, what I'll do is I'll just grab another roll. And so if you can take another roll, if you happen to have one, put that underneath you, then you can kind of get down there in that low back position. But because my upper back is supported, I can relax into it a lot more comfortably, okay? And again, I would just cradle my head just like I did in the other one, okay? Same thing, I can kind of rotate a little more towards one side. This is almost getting into that upper glute area too, so you can kind of get those upper glute fibers, and again, you can kind of shimmy this roll around, put it up a little higher, wherever it feels good. But the good news is, now the pressure is a little more evenly distributed, so I don't have to worry so much about, kind of that upper rib area, and typically I can tolerate this a lot better. And so this is just a nice way to get that area to relax, okay? So that's a nice way to just get after that mid and low back. Again, mid back would just be kind of like this. Again, you can keep those hips up or sit them down, sort of up to you on that one, okay? So that, again, is the back. Okay, so now I'm going to move into the IT band, which is just a big piece of fascia right here that pretty much runs from a muscle up top called the TFL, or tensor fascia lata, down to the side of the knee here. Okay, so big piece of fascia. You also can kind of get into that outer quad area. For any of you who've ever tried this, you can usually attest to the fact that it's pretty uncomfortable in the beginning. Your body will tend to get used to that pressure though, so I would say stay with it if you can. Typically after a few times to a week or two, but usually by then it starts to ease up. So you're going to get this thing right in that IT band area. You don't want to really be on the bone, so kind of feel where your hip bone is and just start right below that, because the hip bone is just going to be uncomfortable. You never really want to be on the bony prominences with these, because that's just again going to be pain and not necessarily getting a lot of benefit out of that. Now, for most of you, it can be a pretty tough place to start when you have both your legs stacked. So you may want to just drape your top leg in front to put a little bit less pressure on the leg that you're working. And then from there, just kind of use your arms to drag that leg across the roll, okay? So I'll just put my legs stacked so you can kind of see a little bit easier what I'm doing, but again, you can certainly be down here. And again, you're just going to go, if I have an area that feels extremely restricted and kind of tender, just try to hold it there if you can. Take a few deep breaths in that position, see if maybe it'll give, and then maybe go on to another area, and then you can see if you can kind of come back to it, okay? As you're in this position, you can also rotate a little bit more towards the ground to sort of get more into that quadricep area, okay? Or if you were here, you can rotate a little more away to get a little bit more pressure into that outer hamstring area, okay? So don't feel like you have to just stay, in one plane. You can kind of play around with this a little bit. And that kind of goes to a point that there's really no perfect way to do some of these. You're just trying to, it's almost like a self-exploration exercise. You're really just kind of feeling things out, going to those areas that feel restricted and sort of tight. So, if one area is not uncovering much, then just kind of move on, go to another area. So you don't necessarily have to stay just on that IT band as you're working that, okay? And going back to what I showed a minute ago, if you come all the way around to the front, that's also a nice way to get into that hip flexor too. So if I'm all the way down here, I can just get that hip flexor. And if I'm all the way around like this, I can just kind of get into that whole quadricep territory, okay? So any of that is definitely fair game as well, okay? Again, if I get into a real tight spot, I can even just hold it. And as I'm holding it, you can even just try to do a little bit of movement while you're there too, okay? Sometimes that can get that area to give a little bit more effectively. So feel free to give that a try as you're getting after the IT band. Okay, well, another good roll we can get into is sort of the lats as well as the pec area. So I already talked a little bit about how to roll the low back and the mid back, and how you can kind of rotate a little more towards one side. So you can just continue that journey and kind of work your way all the way around. And so if I want to get in the lat, usually I'll drop one hand down at that point and just try to leave it heavy on the mat or whatever my hand is on, and just kind of relax. This one takes a little more playing around with to kind of move. I'm just kind of pushing with my legs to sort of move around. I'm trying not to use this arm too much because I want to keep this arm relaxed so it can kind of give into the roll. And so again, I can kind of rotate my hand away. I can kind of rotate my hand a little more down just to kind of get into any area that feels like it needs some attention, okay? And then I can just kind of keep migrating my way around, okay? Until eventually I can roll all the way over until I'm sort of in that pec area. And for that, again, I can kind of I can turn the roll depending on where it feels best and just kind of work any of that terrain. Again, I can kind of turn my hand away or down as long as it feels like I'm just kind of getting into the muscle. Obviously no real pinching or shooting pain, nothing radiating down my hand. But that's a nice way to get into some of those, pec major, pec minor restrictions that a lot of people can tend to have, particularly that have kind of those forward rounded shoulders. So this is just a nice way to roll and kind of open that area up, both again, lat and kind of that whole pec area. Okay, so another roll I'm going to show you guys that I don't see as much is kind of for the inner groin area, more what we call like the adductors. And so a simple way to roll that is generally I'll start out kind of straddling this roll. And so if you sort of get over it like this, and then what you want to do is just get close to the groin on one of your legs. And so I just kind of have the roll back far enough that I can get my elbows free so I can kind of move this way without hitting the roll. And I just kind of start out just kind of rolling, or even rocking back and forth kind of close to the groin, and then just working my way out towards the knee. And so once you can tolerate a little more pressure, you can always do this with your legs straight. But in the beginning, you may want to just start kind of with your leg bent like this, okay? And so eventually progressing to where you're all the way out, kind of towards the side of the knee. This will be a little bit easier, or that would be a little bit more pressure. Okay? So try that roll out. That's a nice one for the groin. It's a little harder, kind of like the IT band, so don't be surprised if that one's a little tender in the beginning, but that can definitely help you uncover some spots you might have not known you had that can be pretty restricted and pretty tender at the beginning. So the last roll I want to throw at you guys is the glutes. So that's a roll that most of you are usually pretty familiar with. I see this done a lot at the gym. And usually people are doing it pretty well. But this one, you're just going to sit on this thing kind of like if it were a chair or a seat. And then just take that leg that you're going to roll on and just sort of put it up on top of your knee. Now, if you're pretty inflexible and it's really hard to get up there, you can straighten that leg out a little bit more, and that's fine. Or if you're super inflexible, you can just sort of do it like this, and that's okay too. But if you can get it over there, it will put those fibers on stretch a bit more, so you can kind of get into this a little bit deeper, okay? And then from there, I'm just using my foot on this side, my hand on this side to sort of roam around. Again, no reason to stay in one place. You can just kind of rotate a little bit, and, either towards or kind of away. Just, again, self-exploration, just kind of feeling around, whatever feels good. And then just do that, until you feel like you've had enough. You can switch sides, and then off you go, and that's the glutes. All right, so as far as my 2 cents on rolling, what can and what can't this thing do for you? I would say that it depends, which is a tough, the gray area question that we always tend to give. But, it really always does depend on the goal. So, what are your goals? And when you think about when it comes to exercise, typically it's strength building, it's muscle building, it's endurance. And so, is it going to check any of those boxes off the list? Not by itself, probably in a big way. If I'm an older guy who's really stiff and inflexible, well, first off, it might even be kind of hard to use this thing in the first place. But if I could, well, then maybe for that individual, it might improve their mobility a little bit. That is something I would want to mention though too. If you're older and you have osteopenia, osteoporosis, definitely clear this thing with your orthopedist, particularly for these stronger rolls like the black ones, because you may not be able to tolerate all that pressure on some fairly brittle bones. So I just want to throw that one caveat out there. But for most individuals that have decent muscle bellies, they typically can take quite a bit of pressure. And so, say for instance, you wake up first thing in the morning and maybe you have, kind of some weird stiffness in your back, kind of tightened up on you a little bit. Or maybe, you did a run the previous day and your legs are still a little sore, but you were hoping to do a hike that day or do another run, or even, go to the gym and do legs. A lot of times if you can use this to take the edge off some of that soreness or that weird kind of achy, pain you might have had, again, nothing major you need to get checked out for, just kind of those minor aches and pains. If you can take the edge off that with this thing, and then that allows you to do a more effective workout that is going to enable you to, get stronger or, build muscle or improve your endurance, that's where I think this thing really shines. So you really have to use this as kind of a supplement or, in addition to a workout rather than in place of. But I've definitely had great results with it, using it that way. So, again, sometimes you wake up and you kind of feel like you have a weird little nagging thing going on. If you can kind of work that out and then do your workout. So say, for instance, before I couldn't really do a row very effectively because I had this little bite in my back, and then I roll out for a minute or two and all of a sudden I can do a row more comfortably. That's going to allow me to maybe load that row a little heavier or do a few extra reps. And then all of a sudden I'm checking the boxes off the list as far as, working towards my goals. So again, that's where this thing really shines. I would encourage you to try it out if, those goals seem to be aligned with what you're trying to get after. As usual, I will put the links to the rolls that I use at the bottom, and feel free to comment below. I hope you guys have some fun.